Limbo is one of my all-time favorite 2D puzzle games. It demands timing and complex problem solving while never letting the player escape the sense of wonder and dread that comes with its black and white aesthetic. As good of a puzzle platformer as it is, the real treat of this short but impactful little game is most certainly the way in which the world is felt by the player. For myself, and many like me, the emotions a game can invoke and the stories they tell are just as important as gameplay. The droning synth layers of the soundtrack working together in unison with contrasting visual tones to make you feel like you don't belong in this foreign world, with only one goal: survive and find your lost sister. Over the years, and after replaying this game at least a dozen times all the way through, I have concluded that the real pull of Limbo comes from the tiny moments of downtime between puzzles. Puzzles that will kill you again and again, repeatedly, until you get the timing, or the trick, or that eureka moment just right. Make no mistake, as cute as the art style is, this is a violent game. The unnamed protagonist can and will expire in any scenario that you do not perfectly execute, but that only makes the success that much sweeter. This is Rocket Moose Gaming, and if you'll join me, well, I'd like to take a quick look back at Limbo. Published in the summer of 2010, the game that we have now went through significant changes during its 6-year development cycle from ideation to release. The universe of Limbo came from a dissatisfied concept artist by the name of Arndt Jensen, working for IO Interactive. You probably know them for Hitman.
2 targets remain.
Arndt thought that the business of making video games at IO was getting a little bit too corporate for his tastes, so he decided to make a quick version of his game in Visual Basic before realizing the true scope of the project. After his needs became apparent, Arndt created a trailer showcasing the concept for the game, attracting far more attention on the internet than he originally thought possible. This event led him to his future co-creator, Dino Patti, coincidentally also a man dissatisfied with his job. The two founded Playdead and got to work on Limbo. Of course, the project would need a full team, about 8 full-time staff and up to 16 temp hires. Originally funded by the 2 founding members of Playdead, the development of Limbo was growing larger and soon required outside investors to make the future of the game possible. It was at this time that Jensen decided to transition from making Limbo a free Windows title into a full retail game, capable of earning back the revenue that his investors needed. Those same investors who had begun making suggestions that would conflict with the original vision of Limbo and reflect on the worst aspects of the industry coming into the late 2000s. Online multiplayer, as well as lengthening the game's runtime and adding adjustable difficulty levels, were all pitched and subsequently ignored by the game's senior staff. This made a few of the investors unhappy, as I'm sure you can imagine. Time would soon prove that leaving creativity in the hands of those who know it best would yield much better results. No doubt one of the worst parts of the video game industry in the last decade and a half is the influence of publishers and non-creatives getting their hands into game development. We've seen it in its most egregious examples: microtransactions, battle passes, as well as the push for games to be live service to help facilitate these kinds of mechanics. There's been a transition in the game dev sphere, where publishers don't see single-player or non-monetizable games as worthwhile, or maybe even desired by the gaming community. And then time after time, when a title such as Limbo comes out to massive and immediate success, developers can hold their ground once more against the suits that wish to turn gaming into an at-home slot machine, with no regard for the player's experience. Now, that isn't to say that these mechanics don't have their place. Free-to-play games have managed to find financial success in the realm of cosmetics and loot boxes for those that are willing to pay, and I'm happy to oblige those that will and reap the benefits. I've spent more time dropping into Call of Duty Warzone than almost any other title in the past 2 years, all without spending a single cent. No matter how annoying the pay-to-customize system is, if it doesn't affect gameplay, I'm more willing to ignore it for the advantages it brings. Pay-to-win systems like 2017's Star Wars Battlefront 2 are a different story, and a different video. We'll get there someday. Alright, enough of a tangent. Back to Limbo. According to sources, almost 70% of the planned content was thrown out to core gameplay reiterations. These cuts were made so that they could polish the game and refine it to the core of his vision, as most of it didn't fit within the context of what they wanted to create. Once Limbo was finished, Playdead decided that their next project would use the third-party Unity engine, as creating their own game engine specifically for Limbo had not only used up the most valuable resource to all of mankind, time, but was severely limiting, most notably its black and white art style. Limbo was released on the 21st of July 2010 to the Xbox Live Arcade, a now defunct platform for games on the Xbox 360 that was largely replaced by the Xbox Live Game Pass. A mistake with the ESRB had the game originally listed as being released on PlayStation as well as Windows devices, but this was quickly and quietly retracted as being a mistake, though the game would come to all platforms, including mobile, in the coming years. It's no secret that video games are somewhat tough to get into. Unless you grew up with a joystick in your hand, it's unlikely that in the year 2022 you are vested with the muscle memory or the patience to get into modern titles. Limbo sidesteps this issue entirely, being accessible to nearly everyone by limiting the controls to 4 simple concepts: move left, move right, jump, and interact. Everything beyond those 4 actions is a mechanism of whatever puzzle you currently find yourself within. This makes the barrier to entry practically zero. Almost anyone can learn to use 4 key bindings, especially when 3 of them are based on movement. For an experienced gamer, the effect is unmatched. You are 100% within the world of Limbo after mere seconds of the boy opening his eyes. Complex mechanics and tutorials are necessary for some games, and certainly would have been for Limbo had they listened to their investors. But the limitations they placed upon themselves brought results, and accessibility as well as immersion are the 2 most significant contributions. Another area where simplicity drives emotion is in the sound design, and more importantly the soundtrack, both of which are intertwined in 6 2 to 4 minute pieces composed by Martin Stig Anderson, the same Martin Stig Anderson that collaborated to make the soundtrack for 2020's Control, another fantastic game that I'll no doubt get around to finishing one day, I'm just sure of it. His ability to mix the ambient sounds of the world into the tracks, such as with the rotating room's saw blades. The sound instills fear directly into the heart of the player, and those with more robust audio systems may find themselves wondering when the last time they took a breath was. From the dark tones of Boy's Fort to the rhythmic echoes of Gravity Jump. There is seemingly never a moment in this game that doesn't use the potential of audio to envelop the player. Even more than the emotional peaks exist its valleys, the sequences between demanding puzzles that let you rest along with the protagonist. A boy who no doubt is disassociating after the 6-foot saw blade that nearly killed him in the previous segment. The ability for Limbo to evoke such strong feelings of anxiety in the player are why these infrequent sections feel so impactful when you finally get to them. Survival is not guaranteed, and the somber reverberations of the soundtrack keep you grounded in that reality. The game's puzzles are the standout piece for the slow buildup of dread and fear in Limbo. Whether they require perfection in placement or patience from the player, your impending gruesome death is mere moments away at any time. Even minor miscalculation will cause you to lock yourself into a trial and death game loop that was originally introduced to keep players from re-attempting non-workable solutions to problems. Personally, I think they're a good way at doing what art is meant to do, allow you to feel, in this case, empathy. The basically helpless, albeit resourceful, little kid lives and dies in dozens of ways based on your input, and watching his eyes fade out is heart-wrenching every single time. Even if the sound of his legs snapping sounds like a Kit Kat commercial more than actual bodily trauma. There's also something to be said for the way the designers built the levels to assist the player in figuring out its solution. In one area early in the game, the player finds a small box floating near the edge of a pond of water deeper than the boy can enter. The box itself can't float, as your first instance of drowning will no doubt prove. However, the game has thoughtfully introduced the climbing and rope mechanic earlier on, so placing one just out of reach a few feet prior signals to the player that even though the box cannot float, it can still boost the boy up enough to retrieve the actual item needed to cross the pond, this time without visiting Old Man Jones.
You're afraid to get wet.
All jokes aside, it's crazy just how much the developers perform playtesting and quality assurance just to keep the players from doing things that would hurt their experience. We all think of QA as being bug hunters, but that isn't their only purpose in the game. They also have the job of testing how the average individual will respond to the obstacle, so that they can direct players gently toward the answer. If they didn't, the player would likely spend 20 minutes just pushing the box into the water as far as possible, thinking the next time it'll be far enough to make the jump before it sinks. Whether it's the room rotating, the lights shining on the path forward, or a brain slug. So many brain slugs. Limbo does an excellent job at making sure the player has the information they need to make a good decision.
Bruh.
I said good decision. You know what? Fine. So yeah, if you can't tell by this point in the video, I basically love this game. Limbo introduced the high school version of me to the idea that games could be simple and still worth playing. I was growing up fast with an Xbox 360, thinking that Battlefield and Halo were the future, and that the term puzzle game was only to be used when describing Portal. Then I got my hands on this wonderful little side-scroller, and realized that complexity did not inherently equal beauty, and that in minimalizing a game, they maximized the experience.